They say that imitation is the highest form of flattery, but the only people who say that are shameless rip-offs like Adam Wilborn and not one-of-a-kind creative geniuses like, oh, I don't know, me. Now, yes, the finite nature of the universe does mean that some ideas will organically just repeat, and I suppose Adam is quite a common name, but still, when you look closer, it often pays to be cynical. Nowhere, though, is this more true than the world of film, where suspicious similarities are very, very common. My name is Adam Cleary, and these are 8 movies that incredibly got away with being total rip-offs. But before we begin, why not subscribe to stay notified? Ding, ding, done. Number 8, The Hunger Games. Ripped off Battle Royale. Both of these kids fighting each other to the death for entertainment purposes movies are set in alternate futures where a shady government uses the death games as a means of terrorizing the populace. In both cases, there's an unhinged leader pulling the strings, the air-quote games are controlled to stop kids escaping, and there are psychotic volunteers. There's also, you know, a love story to balance the hyper-violence. If you can't see the similarities or how similar The Hunger Games was to The Running Man, you're probably not looking close enough. Shit, the protagonists even both have dead families, which was all apparently a coincidence, as The Hunger Games writer Suzanne Collins claims she wasn't even aware Battle Royale existed when she wrote her novels. Yeah. Number 7, Monsters Inc. Ripped off Little Monsters. Pixar and Disney have both been accused of ripping other movies and books off a fair few times, but one of the most egregious comes in the shape of the wonderful Monsters Inc. The delightful tale of 2 monsters blurring the boundary with the real people world is so close to cult 80s movie Little Monsters that it almost defies belief. In it, Fred Savage's kid meets a blue monster with purple spots and goat-like horns when he crosses into his world through the portal under Savage's bed. That relationship inspires the monsters to question whether scaring kids is really the right thing to do, and, well, you've seen this before, haven't you? That's because Monsters Inc. seems to liberally borrow themes, story details, and actual character designs from it. Number 6, The Fast and the Furious. Ripped off Point Break. In both Point Break and The Fast and the Furious, a young, upcoming FBI agent infiltrates a gang of high-octane extreme sports criminals to discover who is behind a string of robberies. Both leads fall in love and develop a strong bromance with the group's charismatic leader, while pinning the blame on a rival gang before realizing the truth and ultimately letting the villain / their new pal escape. Obviously, cars and surfboards are very different things, but the story similarities between Catherine Bigelow's cult classic and the start of the behemoth petrolhead franchise are impossible to ignore. Number 5, Star Wars The Force Awakens. Ripped off The Force Unleashed 2. Given that Lucasfilm decided to tighten the core of Star Wars lore after Disney bought the company from George Lucas for a huge sum of money and jettisoned a lot of the expanded universe material, it's surprising how much they've drawn from that pot ever since. Star Wars The Force Unleashed and its sequel were both removed from canon after that deal in 2012, which is possibly why J.J. Abrams thought basically pilfering from the game for The Force Awakens was totally fine. The game's Battle for Endor expansion included the chance to murder Han Solo, and the scene was so like his cinematic death that it is simply impossible to be a coincidence. And if stealing from one old canon game wasn't enough, Kylo Ren's costume in The Force Awakens was basically a redo of that worn by Darth Raven in Knights of the Old Republic. You know, Darth Raven, the other conflicted dark side apprentice. Number 4, KRULL. Ripped off Star Wars. Somewhat inevitably, Star Wars has, quotes, inspired lots of rip-offs, precisely because it was such an important cinematic moment. And one of the most obvious came not too long after the original film's release, in the shape of KRULL in 1983. The classic fantasy film, which is, trust me, a lot better in your memory than if you went back and watched it now, barely even pretends to hide the similarities. Freddie Jones plays the Obi-Wan-like old mentor to Ken Marshall's chosen one hero Prince Colin, Beast is a Darth Vader stand-in, and his army of slayers are stormtroopers. Number 3, The Incredibles. Ripped off the Fantastic Four. Some might say that The Incredibles is so much of a nostalgic pastiche that any accusations of willful plagiarism are somewhat moot, and I am thus a gigantic nerd, but it's hard not to think it crosses over into imitation more than homage a fair bit. The characters in Brad Bird's genius take on the post-superhero movement, which also draws on Watchmen, for inspiration are all a Fantastic Four member in another guise. Mr. Incredible is the Thing with his super strength and volatility, Elastigirl is Mr. Fantastic with her stretching powers, Violet is Sue Storm with her invisibility and force field, and Dash is Johnny Storm with his speed, but more importantly the attitude. There are admittedly more nuances in there as well, and Pixar definitely do deserve credit for their storytelling, but there's definitely some flagrant naughtiness going on as well. Number 2, Star Trek 2009. Ripped off Star Wars! When it came to relaunching the Star Trek franchise after the Next Generation stars hung up their movie costumes for the last time, J.J. Abrams basically made a moving picture CV for his future gig directing Star Wars. His agenda was to revitalize the franchise and make it financially viable, not merely the reserve of a smaller but committed fan base, since, you know, that's not the key to millions and millions and millions of dollars at the box office, and he sought to do that by basically making it Star Wars. James Kirk was rebranded as an orphaned farm boy wrestling with his destiny, assisted by an older mentor to thwart an evil, megalomaniac alien intent on destroying planets. And, you know, there's a definite dumbing down of the science in favour of some more swashbuckling elements, which definitely angered many a Star Trek fan. Number 1, Home Alone. Ripped off Game Over. Strictly speaking, you could be forgiven for thinking that Home Alone is, in fact, a die-hard ripoff, but it was an entirely different movie that seems to have inspired writer John Hughes. The multi-named French movie Game Over, also known as Deadly Games, 3615 Code Père Noël, and Hide and Freak for some reason, portrayed a boy called Thomas who defended his home and grandfather by setting up booby traps to thwart a psychopathic villain who claims to be Santa Claus. If it wasn't for the actual murders, including that of Thomas's dog for Christ's sake, and Thomas believing the intruder to really be Santa, it would basically be the same movie.
Hey guys, before you go, I just wanted to talk to you about a brand new project that we're going to have starting up pretty soon. It's a brand new channel called That Film Theory, the pace of which is going to be a bit more relaxed and focus on kind of video essays on our favourite cinematic experiences. If that sounds like something that you're interested in, then click the screen and go over there. Hopefully we'll see you soon. We're passionate about it, so come support us.